Right, good evening.
I would like to call this meeting of the City Council special meeting and joint work session with Laramie Planning Commission at City Hall Council Chambers, Tuesday, April 22nd at 6 p.m. And to start with, Nancy, if you will call the roll on the special meeting.
Bowling.
Here.
Freed.
Here.
Lockhart.
Here.
Newman.
Here.
O'Doherty. Here. Shumway.
Here.
V-Hill.
Here.
Richardson.
Here.
And Cumby absent. That's 8 present and 1 absent, Your Honor.
Great, thank you. And next, moving on to public comment on non-agenda items. Any items that are not on tonight's agenda that anyone would like to speak to online or in the room? Okay, seeing none. Nancy, can I move it over to you for the reading of the special meeting? Thank you.
Notice is hereby given that a special meeting of the City Council and a joint work session of the Laramie City Council and Laramie Planning Commission will be held Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025 at 6:00 p.m. at 406 Ivinson Avenue, Council Chambers, and via Zoom meeting for the following purpose. City Council special meeting will have 1 call to order, 2 roll call, 3 the 5th Tuesday open house meetings, number 4, adjourn the special meeting and convene the work session. At the work session, we'll have public comment on non-agenda items. A work session for housing plan overview. Number 3, a work session on digital billboards. Number 4, city council updates and council comments. And number 5, agenda review. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, City Clerk. So to start with, I'm just going to open this up. Let's go ahead and start with the Tuesday open house meeting. And I would like to see if anybody has a motion to bring forward regarding that. Councilor Bowling.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I move to cancel the 5th Tuesday open house meeting on April 29th, 2025 due to a conflict with the Albany County elected officials meeting to provide updates related to changes on property taxes, county budget, and elections.
Moved by Bowling.
Second?
Second by O'Doherty. Any discussion? Councilor Newman.
I have an amendment when you are ready.
Go for it.
And Nancy, please help me through this. I think I should just, here's what I got. I move to amend the motion to read. I recommend to move the meeting from April 29th, 2025 to April 30th, 2025. Is that sufficient?
Motion to move the meeting from April 29th to April 30th. Is there a second?
Second.
Shumway, Councilor Shumway for a second. Any discussion? This is very awkward. Go ahead, Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I understand why we want to maybe cancel it, but I think the postponement is better because we're just starting to get this kicked off. I don't want us to miss the commissioner meeting. I think that's very important and affects all of us. But we do need to have this meeting and start kicking it off right versus waiting 3 months. So, and we already have a site in mind anyway, so
Great.
I think it's great to go. Thank you.
Councilor Newman.
Sorry I didn't talk to anybody beforehand, but I did talk to Nancy, and there are no conflicts with boards or commissions, and we do have a spot, and we have a couple spots that we talked about just in case the firehouse doesn't, in West Laramie doesn't work. So.
Great. Councilor Bowling.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And thank you, Councilors Newman and Lockhart, for your amendment. I'm all for the idea that we need to move quickly on 5th Tuesdays. I think the intentions have just been knowing that property tax will be one of the largest issues that we'll face. And this is an opportunity to make sure that the public also knows And I would encourage city staff to make sure that we're cycling that into our marketing engines, that the public knows that this is a meeting that they need to attend, can attend, should attend, be encouraged to attend. I have no problem with a meeting on a fifth Wednesday.
All right, sensing that people are maybe ready to vote on this, Nancy, will you call, when you get a second, okay, call the roll on this, please, on the amendment.
Vice Mayor.
Oh, sorry, public comment. Thank you for the reminder. Any public comment for those, anybody online in the room? All right, now please, if you'll call the roll.
This is on the amendment. Bowling.
Yes.
Freed.
Yes.
Lockhart.
Yes.
Newman.
Aye.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Shumway.
Yes.
Vigil.
Yes.
Richardson.
Aye.
Cumby is absent. That's 8 yeses, 0 nos, and 1 absent, Your Honor.
Great, thank you. So that amendment passes. Now back to the main motion. As amended, thank you. If you'll call the roll on that as well. Well, actually, public comment on that as well. And seeing none, if you'll call the roll on the main motion as amended.
Bowling.
Aye.
Freed.
Yes.
Lockhart.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
O'Doherty.
Yes.
Shumway.
Yes.
Vigil.
Yes.
Richardson.
Yes.
Cumby. Absent. That's 8 yeses, 0 nos, and 1 absent, Your Honor.
Great, thank you. And that ends the work session, the special meeting, sorry, and we will now convene the work session. Yes, City Clerk.
I mean, you can adjourn by unanimous consent to
Okay.
it. Would you like a
I
motion?
make a motion to adjourn the special meeting.
Thank you. Second to the motion?
Aye.
Councillor Lockhart, we'll say, seconded that. And voice vote on this one is fine, Nancy, to adjourn? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that carries now on to the convening the work session. And we will start the work session with public comment on non-agenda items. Again, oh, yes, thank you. We decided we would do roll call for this, so we make sure we have it on both planning and zoning and council. So yes, please, roll call first.
Council, Bowling.
Present.
Freed.
Yes.
Lockhart.
Here.
Yes.
Newman.
Here.
O'Doherty.
Here.
Shumway.
Here.
Vigil.
Here.
Richardson.
Here.
And Cumby is absent, so we have 8 on the council and 1 absent. Planning Commission, Buccino, absent. Heisler White.
Present.
Moody.
Here.
O'Toole.
Here.
Schneider, absent. And Matamore.
Here.
So we have 5 present and 2 absent on Planning Commission. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, and thank you for the reminder to do roll call for that one. Now we're going to go back to, for the second time, public comment on non-agenda items. Any public comment? Doesn't look like it again, so we will go ahead and move forward on that. And we will now start with the work session and start with zoning and planning. And it looks like Director Tini, are you leading the efforts to start on this? Before you get going, I just wanted to make a quick comment to the zoning and planning folks who are here. We just really appreciate you taking the time to be here. We recognize this is not a day that you normally convene, and you are not getting paid to be here, and you have kindly come to join us. I think what we are hoping for tonight is to get some questions answered that we have, which some of you may already know. I think you maybe have had a presentation more times than we even have. But in addition to that, thinking about as we move forward, does the council, I think, not only needs to consider this ordinance and how, if we want to move forward with it, but if we want to look at the code more broadly to say, does the current code still fit the needs of Laramie? And so trying to kind of ascertain that from the presentation tonight to determine how do we want to move forward. And having you all here as we're thinking about that may then give you a little bit more insight as to where council is coming from. And so again, if we do go down that road. So again, I just really, and I'm sure the rest of the council really wants to thank you all for taking the time out of your night to be here with us. So I think that's all I had, and so I'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Director Tini.
Vice Mayor, just so on the agenda, the first item technically is the housing status report. But Vice Mayor, I would recommend that if you're more comfortable in starting with the other topic, it's totally fine. It doesn't matter. We're both here. You do have the Planning Commission, which you specifically asked for to speak to the digital billboards. And so I would, if you're fine with that and that's the pleasure of your group, then I would be fine with that. So just tell us what you would wish.
Thank you. And if it's okay with you, City Clerk, if we need to amend the agenda, I had thought about this earlier, just keeping in mind that if any of these folks on planning and zoning want to go home, and since they're here for the billboard piece specifically, and so if other folks are okay with us reversing that order so they can have the option, do we need to make a motion to do that, Nancy?
Yes,
City
and
Clerk?
here's the tricky part. Yeah, we have, well, it's just a procedure according to Bob. He's okay with us doing that one. It's just procedure. But we do have to have a planning commission motion as well, since we have a joint. Or we have to do this is kind of tricky. We could maybe do the voice vote together, as long as we have 2/3 majority vote to change the agenda.
Let's go ahead and do the voice vote together with 2/3 majority. Would you like us to also show hands so that you can see our 2/3?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay. So can I get a motion to switch the agenda so that we speak to billboards?
I move to change the agenda such that the housing report is item 2C and the billboard discussion is item 2B.
Second.
Motion by O'Doherty, second by Councilor Newman.
Just for the sake of clarity, can we have a planning commission motion and second too, or just an agreement, a first and second there?
The chairman of the planning commission will entertain a motion to move item 2B to 2C.
I'd like to make a motion to change item 2B to 2C and 2C to 2B.
Thank you. There's a second?
Great.
And then we could go ahead and
O'Toole,
do-
second.
Thank you.
Okay, and so can we do voice vote of 2/3 then?
Yeah.
Ex-City Clerk?
Yes.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand if you will. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, raise your hand and same sign. Okay, motion carries. Thank you, City Clerk, and thanks for being flexible and allowing these folks to get out if they decide they want to after this first part. So now, over to you and billboards. Mr. Gabatuller.
Yes, Honorable Vice Mayor, members of Commission and Council. In your cover sheet, you did get an overview of what we're hoping to discuss in this work session this evening, and there was also a set of questions in there as well. Vice Mayor, I would propose that we go through this presentation and then jump to the questions that we have and allow the representatives from Lamar to jump in as well as city staff.
That would be great. I think we'd like to hear from them as well, so that'd be super.
Okay. All right. Well, I'd like to walk us through tonight some key policy considerations for the council if it is interested in revisiting the city's current billboard ordinance. And then mainly tonight, I want to show what really we can regulate as a municipality, what's available to us. I think as a precursor to this, both bodies are aware of city staff's perspective and recommendation on the subject, which it does the consideration of changing code to allow for non-conforming billboards to expand is currently not something in alignment with past planning efforts. But since times are always changing and evolving, right, we want to have this work session to examine what our policy looks like, which is pretty clear. Other than the I-80 corridor, billboards are not allowed, new ones are not allowed, existing within city limits. They are not allowed to be enlarged or expanded in any way, and they're considered non-conforming in that manner. So this really is a high-level overview aimed at helping us frame the questions we need to ask as we look to balance future aesthetics, economic activity, safety, as well as legal requirements. Don't you love it when it works on the first time? So let's begin with the why. Why are we, or why should we revisit our existing ordinance on billboards? There are several reasons. First, to respond to technological changes, right? The rise of digital signage means that a possible rewrite would help us keep pace with the current realities. Second, we need to consider alignment with the comprehensive plan, which, as I mentioned, currently there is language in the comprehensive plan that specifically speaks against the expansion of billboards. However, we're doing a comprehensive plan rewrite starting this year. We're hoping to council to bring that contract to you with our new consultant at the May 6th meeting. And part of that effort is examining everything, ordinance-related, planning-related. So could the billboard discussion be placed in that effort? Absolutely, to see whether the tone has changed among the public and among stakeholders when it comes to advertising through digital billboards. Balancing community aesthetics, economic development, safety, this is along the same lines. I mean, in the past, it's found that billboards are appropriate on the I-80 corridor and nowhere else, and they've really been phased out over time. It's actually interesting, we came across an archive folder in the planning office of a lot of pictures from the 70s and 80s of a signage inventory of that time, and it really is amazing kind of the decrease of the amount of signs, especially along 3rd and Grand. I mean, and anyone that's been here a while can appreciate that. And then, you know, fourth here is it to address nonconformities and enforcement concerns. So they are currently nonconforming, which means they cannot be altered in any way. So I was about to say next slide, but I have the power. So, okay. So getting to the meat of it here, what really as a municipality can we regulate? I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but currently we're regulating it to the max by not allowing them new ones or to expand. However, on the I-80 corridor, there are location requirements, spacing and distance requirements, and I'm just going through these because these are how we regulate billboards in the I-80 corridor where they are allowed. This could easily be fitted for, you know, a more urban area, not a interstate corridor, right? So, but these are the areas that we currently regulate. So location, where billboards can be placed. This could include restrictions near parks, schools, and historic corridors. We can regulate spacing. Currently, I believe it's 500 feet between billboards, but that's on the I-80 corridor. Size and height are also tools we have. Limiting square footage or establishing maximum height. Illumination is something I think both bodies have already discussed, and the representatives from Lamar have informed us on. But that can also be regulated. Duration, time between ads, because they are changing. That's the nature of the digital billboard. And basically 8 seconds, 10 seconds, I mean, that type of duration. So a couple of additional areas. I talked about intervals, prohibition of motion or flashing lights. That's obviously a safety concern, right, that we'd want to address with any rewrite of the billboard ordinance. Nighttime dimming requirements, localities are able to impose those. And then special limitations near residential zones, which we actually already do and have in code for electronic messaging centers. So that's not totally new to us there. This one, next slide, we've kind of gone and discussed a few times, but really when it comes to content, there's really nothing that the municipality is able to regulate there, of course, because of our wonderful First Amendment that we have. So anything content-based is kind of off limits for regulation, for regulating. So given that these current billboards are all considered non-conforming, we could also, as was actually proposed in this text amendment, I know we're taking a broader view this evening, but looking at the non-conforming section and adding a area there for just these that are present, that Lamar will talk about, Lamar representatives will speak to this evening, and not allowing new ones. Of course, when we go that route, we run into the issue of Lamar being the only game in town when it comes to advertising, right, or the billboards. So it would be difficult to not allow other billboard and advertising companies to come in with that approach. So that's something we would need to strongly consider as well when just looking at the non-conforming section. So, as I mentioned before, we are entering into a pretty extensive community engagement effort with the comprehensive plan update. This is an area, this is a time and was a time in the past when the public was asked about things like this. Sign code, is it working? Is it in coordination with the current community values and character? So I would say a policy change like this, such a large policy change, it may, from staff's perspective, if we are looking at going that route, maybe a good idea to postpone until we are able to have those discussions through the comprehensive planning process, which is one of the big reasons why I'm standing up here tonight not in recommendation of approving this text amendment, right? Because we're basing our recommendation, and I believe the Planning Commission can speak to that as well, on the past comprehensive plan as well as a few others that are mentioned in that staff report for the actual text amendment. So I'm going to jump ahead here to, I know we want to have some questions this evening, but really to frame those questions, I think, what outcomes do we want to prioritize? Obviously, are we going to the route of allowing digital conversions? What areas that I mentioned are of interest to regulate? And we really, from this work session, we really as staff would like to have some direction on how to work with the applicant moving forward through this text amendment process. That will come back to you on first reading, whenever that is. I think it's postponed at this point indefinitely, but anyways, that's staff's presentation. Vice Mayor, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and hear from Lamar next, and then questions at the end, if that works for everyone. All right. If you would like to come up, Ms. Getz, we'd like to hear from you as well. Thank you.
Good evening, Council and members of Planning Commission. I'm Megan Getz. I'm Lamar's representative. Vice Mayor, what questions, I don't want to be repetitive, the council submitted to Lamar a list of questions. We provided the responses to those questions with exhibits. I believe you all have those. So what questions or further information can we provide to you?
We do all have those. The one thing I wonder about, though, is for the public's, they don't have those, as far as I know. Those are, no, wait, are they attached on here? Oh, yeah, combined exhibits, here we go. Sorry, I was looking at them from the email.
No,
and so those are all there. Are there specifics then that maybe you want to address that weren't in this, or are there additional questions that folks have thought of that weren't submitted initially? Councilor Newman.
Should we, okay, should we just let them present the PowerPoint that we got in our emails? Because I think that's the exhibits, there were like, I don't even remember how many, like 200 pages or something, but the PowerPoint's really short that would hit.
That would be pretty succinct.
Right, would hit on all of those.
That feels like a nice approach to me. Are folks good with that?
Vice Mayor, I just want to make sure that you all know the PowerPoint is the same presentation that we have provided
Earlier.
to both bodies. So I'm glad to walk through it again. Thank you, Councilor Newman, for pointing that out. I just wasn't sure what you all wanted from us tonight, so I sent it to your clerk in case it was requested of us. I'm glad to go through it again. It may be unduly repetitive for folks.
What would folks like to see it again, not like to see it again? Councilor Bowling?
I think it would be helpful for the public that's viewing this online currently or might watch the recording and might not have had the chance to attend the previous meetings or see this before. It never hurts to get the update.
Yep.
Okay, it sounds like folks are in agreement on that. So we can, Mr. Matamore, do you have, Chair
I'll be the
Matamore?
third time Planning Commission's seen it, so we could sit through it one more time. If we could take it, you can take it.
To that point, thank you. And in the hopes of maybe other folks not seeing it before and seeing it now, if we can maybe quickly walk through it. If there were questions you had before that were answered, why don't we hold off on those because you've gotten those answers before in a previous presentation. If new questions arise from this presentation, we can go ahead and get those asked now. Does that sound fair to folks? Just to kind of help expedite this in because we have seen it before. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll try and go through this pretty quickly. I think everyone is familiar with Lamar. Lamar is an organization, an entity. If you have any questions, certainly let me know. With me tonight are your Wyoming folks, and that is the faces that you've regularly seen, Craig Ben-Dixon, Jamie Rideout, and also with us tonight is Chris Bates. Chris is with Daktronics, so some of you have seen a different person from Daktronics before. That's the South Dakota office. They do all the lighting, all the digitization, so they can answer those specific questions. There's a module here, if you want to hold that up. There's a module, so if you have questions about the board itself, we have all that here. We have previously provided information about technicalities, the proposed locations, the details, the benefits, and the safety of digitizing the boards. Just so everyone is clear, there are 4 boards in the city limits, 3 on the 3rd Street or 287 corridor, 1 on Grand Avenue at 20th and Grand. Those are the boards that we are looking at. Lamar has proposed in this text amendment to remove 1 board to put up in a different location, or to, I shouldn't say to put up, to convert in a different location a digital board. So that is the presentation essentially with the text amendment. This is what your city council discussed, and it's very much in line and concert with everything you're talking about today, which is how do you engage your community. This was the front page of the Boomerang. It's now been a couple of years, but it was striking to me that you all were talking about it again tonight, which is how do we communicate what we're doing with our community? How do we engage the community? And Lamar has said utilizing a digitized board is a perfect way for you to help accomplish that goal. This was the presentation, this was the video of the board itself. I am going to skip that simply because pursuant to one of your questions, we took videos live time both in the day and the night that I think are more representative of what that board looks like. So that is available as an exhibit linked to the City Council's meeting materials and also something that you received. So we have provided information, and this is a lot more in line with the questions that you answered as far as how the boards work. There is no scrolling or flashing. They are high-definition static images. They provide a more efficient method of changing. They are environmentally friendly. There are 7 slots in the rotation. The 8th slot is dedicated to you as the City of Laramie to do with what you want. The dwell time for each slot is 8 seconds. In Wyoming, Lamar currently operates, and I believe it's now 23 is the total number?
No, 18 is correct.
18 is correct. LED digital displays throughout the state. You all asked in the questions to us what other states had them, and I provided that specific allocation to you. If you have additional technical questions, Mr. Bates, Chris Bates from Daktronics is probably the best person to answer those. We provided to you engineering of the looms that are emitted, and as you can see, the signs that are in the locations now emit more looms than are there. We also showed you where you could see them or how much of an approach or distance you could see. Additionally, I've met with you all before and talked about how the digital boards actually have the louvers on them to direct the light down. So you're actually focusing the light more down and creating less light pollution than you would. One thing that I think is really important to mention is that the only way you eliminate some of the concerns or you absolutely mitigate some of the concerns that were raised, for example, if there were a bird or bat impacts or if there was light pollution itself, is that you have to then go dark across the entire area. And so just regulating one board isn't going to have a significant impact on those issues because the areas we're talking about are not black, right? They're not out in the woods in the middle of Vitavu. They're around a lot of other lights. For example, if you look at the Maverick sign that's on 3rd Street, that is going to be consistently more bright than what one of these boards on 3rd Street would do. So in order to completely mitigate or eliminate some of those concerns, you would need to have the city go all dark during certain periods of time. And I believe this council has already actually considered that, and there are just as many safety concerns about doing so or other, crime concerns, et cetera, that impact that decision than just the board itself. So I'm just bringing that up since it's a much bigger discussion. The waste and the energy that's associated with it, the waste is obviously far less because you're not having the boards blow vinyl or have to be replaced. As we've showed you before, one of those modules can easily be replaced on site if a portion of the board goes out. And then we did provide you what the energy consumption is. I believe that was a question, and we showed you that yes, there's a difference between digital and static. The Lamar is represented. It continues to look for solar and other non-energy consumption options as the world allows. We've talked with you about how these boards are constructed and the maintenance and safety that are with them. We've talked with you about what the maintenance requirements are and how the display replacement is actually much more accommodating and much cleaner and aesthetic as to how and when that takes place. We've talked with you about the responsible lighting practices. Again, we have a Daktronics representative here if you have further questions. This was the actual presentation on that lighting that I think you've all seen several times. We've talked with you about network operations. There were lots of questions about how do we make sure somebody doesn't get in and tamper with the system and inappropriately post something. We've talked about how inappropriate messaging is immediately and 24/7 vetted, but then also monitored so that in the event somebody hacks into the system or there's anything as far as a breach of security, that can be immediately handled. I provided in our supplements a considerable amount of information about what that network's operation system looks like. We also provided the digital traffic safety and the standards from the Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration. Multiple studies done across the country that show this is a net safety zero, meaning there are no safety impacts to pedestrians or traffic as a result of digital boards. I think you're all familiar with the proposed locations. Again, on the 3rd Street corridor, there is another board that's on South 287, but that's actually in the county. It appears to be in the city, but it's in the county. So those northern 4 boards are what we are talking about, as well as the board on 20th and Grand. Lamar would like to convert. Of those 4 boards, Lamar would like to convert 1 for 1 as it relates to those static infrastructures to digitization. We've shown pictures before about those proposed locations. We've talked ad nauseum about how the digital sign technology and on-premise technology that's running 24/7 all through the night is currently right there and available and what you're seeing now. And then the benefits for the customers. 100% of Lamar's business right now in Laramie is local. We provided who those customers were, and of course you can drive down and see what they are. And we've talked about what the benefits are so that the city could say, hey, we are having an open house on this Tuesday. Please come join us at the Laramie Fire Station. Number 3, we would like for you to come and talk about these issues. Or we have this public safety emergency happening right now. We need an Amber Alert. Or here is something that we want you to be alive. We want you to know about alive in real time. Or by the way, here is what is happening in our community, and we've talked about how Lamar also repetitively not only gives the city that 8th slot, but also donates and reduces its fees to nonprofits and community events to help advertise and promote what's going on within the community at the time. Natural disasters, for example, COVID, or gosh forbid, the Laramie River floods. What do we do? In memoriams, as well as congratulations. We have shared that from our perspective, these boards are going to be here forever. I mean, they are sitting there, they are here. And so we have talked about that this is a win-win for the community to utilize this infrastructure, modernize it, and give the city and our communities and our businesses multiple benefits. So I tried to fly through that. Mr. Matamore, did I go better than?
Good job.
Okay.
This is pretty speedy. Yeah, good work. Any questions currently? Yes, Councilor O'Doherty.
From what I could tell, the only billboard in Laramie right now that has lighting is the one by Fremont University by the Link Cycling. So the other ones don't even have any illumination that I could see. Is that right? I didn't see any meter or any light shining on them.
They all have the ability to be lit up, but it would require certain electrical upgrades to be brought to the site. And Lamar has debated whether or not that is cost effective for them to do that, especially given the change in most of the technology to go to digitization.
Other questions from Ms. Getz? Yes, sir. Councilor Lockout.
Thanks, Vice Mayor. Megan, so there's 8 slots available, well, 7. So what happens when, in case 7 don't get, all 7 aren't fulfilled?
Craig, would you answer that for me? I don't know the answer to that, Councilman.
Just curious.
Come up.
Sorry. Craig Ben Dixon, Lamar. So a couple things. We can run PSA ads, which are
community messaging or just national messaging on different things. Or in most cases, what I do is I don't do that, and the customers that are paying for it just get extra time. Yep.
Good to know. Great, thank you.
Yep.
Great. Yes, sir, please, Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Yeah, thank you for the presentation for the second time. I really liked it, and appreciate the answers that you sent to the questions that council provided. A couple, but maybe the first one, I know we talked about 100% of the current billboards are local, and maybe this is more of a Lamar question, but can you speak to, after billboards go through this transition to be digitized, do we see an uptake in regional or national advertisers, or are there statistics about, does that change who then is going to try to access that billboard?
Thank you, Councilmember Freed. I'll give you the first bluff at the answer, and Craig can tell me if I'm wrong. Lamar typically sees an increase in local advertisers because there's more accessibility and availability for those slots.
Got you running up and down.
No, it's fine. I need my steps. So it's fluid. So right now it's 100% local, but our contracts can be 4 weeks up to 2 years. And so that can relatively change, weekly. Laramie is not a big DMA, and that's typically where you see national and regional buys. And so
Explain what
With the DMA, yeah.
So it's the size of the advertising market. And so it's based off of TV, where you look at commercials. It's kind of funny, actually. Like Gillette, Wyoming is part of the Denver DMA. So if you live in Gillette, you're actually seeing commercials for Denver, Colorado. And it's just because of the size. And so Laramie's part of the Denver DMA. But they're spending their money in Denver. They're not spending it in Laramie, and it's because of the population.
Okay. Thank you. And just one thing to keep in mind that we had talked about earlier, while it is lovely that an 8th spot could be saved for the city, I think we need to think about this as though we don't have the 8th spot, because we don't want to even appear to have the quid pro quo, we'll give you this, we'll get that. And so the decision making, even if that does happen down the road, one way or the other, the decision making should exclude that. Councilor Newman.
Is Bob online?
He is at a conference, and so is not online.
Because I had the same question about them removing, like if we wanted to change it, them removing one for the other ones to become digital. I wanted to know if it worked both ways. I'll email Bob.
Okay, great. I'd love to thank you, Ms. Getz. If there aren't any questions, I'd love to just have a minute to talk with zoning and planning to get a little bit more of a sense. I know not everyone had the chance to watch the video from their decisions. To kind of hear some feedback from where you all landed, I think would be really helpful to the council as we're thinking about moving forward. Yeah, you're good. Thank you. Sorry.
Vice Mayor, if I may.
Please.
Hey, would it be possible to put up the first photograph in the Lamar presentation, the one of 3rd Street looking at the cathedral? Go back.
That one.
That one right there. Okay. We can see Lamar's billboard right there. But if you look to the right, you'll see Epson Center, you see the motel, you see Napa Auto Parts. These are all on-premises freestanding signs. And if we're going to change the text of the code, and I personally, as a businessman who spent 30 years struggling on 3rd Street, the sign code's way too restrictive, if you ask me. But you look at this picture and imagine all these other signs converted to EMCs. They're freestanding, they're tall, and they are on premises, whereas the billboards are non-premises signs. But I could see in that picture probably 5 electronic message signs going all the time, changing every 8-10 seconds. A motel could put one up for their benefit and then lease out advertising space to other businesses and get into competition with Lamar. I could see if we regulate this and allow the EMCs to go up in the air, we're going to have problems with that. I'm not opposed to EMCs. I think Dairy Queen's got a great sign. They don't change it very often, and it's only about 20 seconds, I think, they change it. I've seen some others, the movie theater and others, that are just fine, but they're all monument signs. So if we start with Lamar up in the air, and then we got the motel, we got Epson Center, we got the auto parts, we have a lot of signs that are on 3rd Street and Grand that could be converted to EMCs. So I would like, before we change the code, to realize what we are opening the door to. And I think that's something that needs to have not only commission and elected officials discuss, I think it's going to have to go to the public as well. Now, I'm not opposed to that, but just be aware this is what could happen. Thanks.
Other folks, other perspective from zoning and planning? Yes, please.
Tom makes a great point, and I never really thought about that it would be on-premise signs that are elevated that would be allowed to have EMCs. Is that correct? As opposed to just saying these are off-premise elevated signs, those are the only EMC that would be allowed?
And perhaps Mr. Gabatuller could come up, but from my understanding, if we were to think about changing code to allow more, would this be a part of that? Right now, we're only specifically thinking about the Lamar signs. But if we were thinking about further code, what could that look like?
Yeah, Honorable Vice Mayor and members of the Commission and Council, I'd say that it does open the floodgates as far as all types of signage go, right? We're looking at billboards in this text amendment, which those are defined, right, in code. But some of the others that Commissioner Matamore mentioned would be perhaps considered pole signs, which are also non-conforming. Yeah, I would say, I mean, the Epson Center sign, I mean, the signs that are basically, like monument signs are really the only type of sign that are currently allowed and regulated, whether they're static or digital, or EMC. So a lot of the signs along 3rd are already non-conforming, but in addressing billboards and allowing them to go digital, then I think there really would be not a lot of, not a leg we could stand on to say, well, what about a pole sign? Now, could they convert to digital as well? And then a text amendment would come in. We kind of, I think we need to consider this. I think Commissioner Matamore brings up a very good point. Are they considered billboards? Could they be changed immediately? No, because a lot of those in the advanced auto parts stores that's also a pole sign. So that couldn't be converted currently, but in subsequent text amendments, it's, and once businesses catch wind of this change, then I think you could see a drastic change, as Commissioner Matamore mentioned.
First Mayor, if I could.
Yes, please.
To carry on. The sign ordinance basically created a monopoly for Lamar. And nobody's fault, but, by trying to make billboards non-conforming. We also have all these non-conforming billboards on 3rd and Grand and all over town. If those non-conforming signs were grandfathered in, and the general principle of grandfathering means you cannot change it. So I can't go and do something to the wiring in my house, which was built in 1959, unless I put in a new service panel and bring it up to current code. But since there is no current code for billboards, they're not allowed. The sign ordinance as it exists kind of puts us in a corner. So I think there needs to be some modification of the sign ordinance. But I don't see how you could stop them if we can grandfather a billboard, why can't we grandfather the motel sign? I mean, if we're going to get rid of grandfathering and have a means to get rid of it, then we're going to have to face that problem, and a lot of people are going to want to do it. And we won't have, I don't know, you could check with Bob and see, but the city may not have a very big, strong leg to hold up on for that one. So just want to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments from either,
Well,
yes,
just
please,
a
Mr. Moody.
little clarity, Chair, on the Laramie Planning Commission, what our recommendation was based on. It was for non-compliant, grandfathered in, as Tom says, and the city has a process for not enhancing or enlarging or improving on what it is that was grandfathered in. And I think that the Planning Commission, it was very clear to us that what they were proposing is an enhancement, is an improvement, is an expansion of a billboard's function and process. And without, to open up that non-conformance standard was just going to cause all kinds of problems. And it was pretty obvious to us that we had to recommend to deny, because it was a non-compliance standard thing. But we're expanding the conversation, obviously, as to whether billboards and EMCs and so forth are what Laramie should go with respect to the changing of the.
Thank you.
Michael?
Yes. Oh, thank you. Yes, Councilor O'Doherty.
Yeah, so what I watched the Planning Commission meeting, and I was really impressed by how thoughtful everybody was. And what I took from it was that the Planning Commission isn't in the position to write ordinances.
Right.
It's to comply with what's on there, so that if something wanted to change, then it would have to be at the council level. And then as far as the text amendment, when it was the other board, can you explain what was the reasoning there? Because I already forgot when you
changed to the Board of Appeals?
Yeah.
The variance.
Yes. Oh, no, okay, I'm doing them backwards, aren't I? First you talked about the text amendment and then the variance. Okay, so yeah,
We kind of gone through two text amendments. There was a postponement in November where the text amendment was sort of more inclusive of all billboards. It didn't go after the non-compliant grandfather aspect, and we postponed it, and then they came in with a different, in the February meeting, with a more specific language to be added to the non-compliance portion of the regs.
Great. And then thinking of, thank you, Ms. White.
I think it's worth noting one other topic that was a focus of the Planning Commission was the comprehensive plan. And Philip alluded to this in his introductory remarks, but the comprehensive plan has a number of phrases within it that talk about the reduction of signage, the reduction of clutter, aesthetics, things like that, that apparently are of high value to the Laramie community. Now, we can all agree the comprehensive plan is dated, and that may no longer be the case. Those may no longer be priorities. But I think that was a huge component of our decision-making, that we try to think about what our neighbors want and what the planning documents are in front of us, right? That's our guidance in making decisions. And so that had a huge weight. in terms of how we interpreted, the evidence before us. So I think that's a piece, and while it doesn't contain code, there's nothing binding, but it expresses the will and the sentiment of the people in Laramie. And so I think that's worth noting.
Thank you for that addition, Ms. White. So kind of a little bit to note here, which has been expressed, is, the role of zoning and planning is really to act on the ordinances, the code, the plan that is in place. If council wants to move forward with something different, that is something we can do, but keeping in mind that whatever we decide to do, if we do decide to change, we'll then come back to zoning and planning, and they will again base their decisions on whatever that code and those ordinances are, right? So I think that's something for all of us to just be aware of, and for the public to be aware of. So in thinking about this for council, hearing the presentation that we've had now twice, thank you, and seeing where zoning and planning came from, knowing that a new comprehensive plan will be updated. Can you tell us again when the timing on that is? Sorry, Philip.
Honorable Vice Mayor, it will be kicking off next month, and it's about a year.
About a year, okay. So recognizing that that is in place, and that will involve public comment, public feedback. I guess my question to you, because we want to give zoning and planning direction, do you all want to move forward with kind of, there were talks of we could negotiate with billboards, and maybe 2 are removed and 2 can be digital here or there. Do we want to just move forward and vote up or down on the other? Do we want to wait and see what the comprehensive plan brings about to get more community feedback? If there's something I'm missing, please add it. Yes, Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. It's very, very, very appreciated. So I like to hear all sides of the story. Laramie Live just did a survey on this, and 60% said yes. And there's 375 people that voted. So as far as a community of 30,000, it's not very scientific, but the 375, 30% said yes. So, or 60%, pardon me, 60% said yes. I apologize. So, with that in mind, you start getting your feedback. Now, there needs to be much more feedback, I believe. But also, we have talked about, as far as our plans, to be pro-business. So we're trying to encourage businesses to come to town. We're trying to help businesses. I'm a small business owner. Being able to possibly be up there myself and not have to have a year contract, 2-year contract, maybe a month contract for a special, I think is pro-business, okay? The 171-page document I tried to read that was sent over, I took a nap afterwards because it was very much over my head, but it answered a lot of questions about some of the concerns I've heard from people about the light pollution. Is it going to be a distraction? Is it going to cause accidents? And you drive up and down both, 3rd and Grand, there's already a lot of digital signs. Now, these are higher, but at nighttime, they are dimmed, so I appreciate that. And with only going to have 2 or 3 of them or what have you, I don't see them as a distraction. I see them as pro-business. So we got a long road ahead of us, I believe. But that's why I'm glad we're all together on this. I'm pro it, and I've talked to many people about it. Not everybody is, and you're not going to please everybody. But if we're going to encourage businesses to come to town, and this isn't going to turn into Vegas, I don't believe that at all. They're not flashing. I don't know how many other businesses would want to go out and start getting in the business of advertising for other businesses on their own signs. So I know I wouldn't. So I guess that's my 2 cents.
Councilor Lockhart, can I clarify, are you thinking then open up the code to allow for more of these, or specifically focus on Lamar?
I don't think we need more at this point in time.
Okay.
I think less is better, otherwise that's my opinion. I was like, focus on what we have in front of us right now.
Great, thank you. Councilor Newman.
Well, a lot of what Councilor Lockhart just said is what I was going to say, but I think being not from Laramie, helps me in this scenario, because back home, I watched this same thing happen. And they opened up their sign regulation, and then now some of the streets that used to look like the one above my head now does look like Vegas. And I'm not for that. And it's part of the reason why we moved. Now, could we make this a little bit better? I do believe so. And one of them happens to be this billboard that is blocking some view. The ones that Lamar, and I was looking, they're actually smaller. So we're kind of going in the right step. Do I want more billboards? Absolutely not. Do I want more flashing lights and people advertising other businesses? No. And if I had a business there, I wouldn't advertise somebody else's either. But I think we could make some restrictions, and a lot of them we've already talked about. The sizes of the billboards going down, no flashing lights, the residential louvers that they were talking about, and those kinds of things. So I am for it. I'm for just opening up, maybe writing something for the non-conforming billboards as they are now, and then maybe revisiting the signs when the comprehensive plan comes out. What I don't want is, and I think this would go for any business, to be honest, is somebody coming in telling me personally that I'm not pro-business when I am. And I couldn't come into any of your guys' companies per se and say, that technology is new, but no. Or I couldn't come into your business and say, you have 5 locations, I want you to give up one of them to make this change. I have a really hard problem doing that. And now if Lamar comes to us, or any of these companies come to us and say, hey, we're okay with giving up one of them, that's their decision, not mine. So I would like to see some change. I would really like to see some change in maybe some of the sign regulations that we have now, just with some feedback that I've got from our constituents. And that's what I would say my direction for staff would be.
Other folks? Yes. Councilor Shabway.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to have some clarification. I know that Lamar has talked about 5, maybe reducing to 4 billboards. I want to know the total inventory of potential convertible billboards that there is within the city limits of Laramie.
I'm assuming, Your Honor, you'd like me to answer that.
If you would, please, we'd sure appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilmember Shumway, there are 5 potential boards within the city of Laramie that could be converted, 4 on 3rd Street and 1 on 20th and Grand. Lamar is only interested in converting 3 on Laramie and 1 on Grand.
3 on 3rd.
3 on 3rd.
What did I say, Laramie? Yeah, 3 on 3rd Street.
We were picking up what you were putting down here. Good.
Thank you.
Councilor Bowling.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you, Vice Mayor. And again, I just want to reiterate my thanks to Planning Commission for being here. I know that some of this can feel redundant, but despite the fact that all of our meetings are open to the public, we still suffer from transparency, and this is just another step in that transparency process. So thank you for your time tonight. And then at the risk of being redundant, Vice Mayor, I want to reiterate for myself and for the public that the reason we have a planning commission is to provide guidance and expertise that is not held by the people that sit on this dais every other Tuesday as council. And that's an important part of our overall democratic process. And I really appreciate the guidance that you give us. I don't want to go too far into the weeds of things I think our commissioners and our council members have really eloquently spoke about so far. I just want to add that this also is something that I'd like to consider in relation to our 3rd Street beautification project, which we're all waiting for the YDOT construction to end so that we can begin that beautiful phase of making sure that we're like really highlighting the character and the uniqueness and the wonderful aspects of our downtown corridors. And that project runs between Sheridan and Clark Street. And 2 of these billboards, one at Sheridan and Park and the other at Clark and Fremont, are really on the outside, but very much for me inside of that zone. So I'm not entirely sure what direction we do move forward. I can see that there is some valuable points made about business opportunities, about safety, about expanding access for local advertisers, especially for nonprofits or smaller organizations that have less of an operating budget. But I would be looking, if we bring that forward, to be making exceptions, if we do, for the billboard that is at I-80 and the one that is further north, on the north end of that slot, and not for the ones that would be impacting what the city is really, really working towards, which is that 3rd Street beautification project. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to correct a statement that was made earlier and just make sure that the council is aware that the motion that you made on the March 18th agenda during our regular meeting was to postpone, to hold a work session today, but to also bring back 1st reading on May 20th.
Yes.
So if there are changes to that 1st reading that you would like to see, I think that's what the Planning Division is asking for today. If you want to see, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's kind of what they're needing direction for. The ordinance that's coming before you.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Councilor Bowling.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Sorry, I know I'm not supposed to speak twice in a row.
But Brandon's up next. Sorry, I'm going to cut you off because Brandon had his hand up earlier. No, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because part of mine was that this won't come back to planning because we just postponed it. And then I answered my own question on that. So that's really all I wanted.
Okay, so just kidding. Right back to you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you, Councilor Newman. And thank you, City Clerk, for that clarification. And I think the other point that I want to reiterate personally that I think is very resonant coming from my fellow commissioner here and also from city planning is that the community engagement aspect of the comprehensive plan updates is an incredibly important part of that process. And for a governing body that, despite our best efforts, consistently suffers with transparency issues or criticisms thereof, bringing this motion forward again before that process has a chance to play out, I think would be a misstep.
Councilor Vigil.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'm inclined to agree with Councilor Bowling. I think if, we had some public engagement around billboards with the last comprehensive plan. I'd like to see that play out with this one as well, especially if this is about to kick off. It's a year-long process. I would really appreciate some of that public input through those channels.
Councilor, Mr. O'Toole.
So I don't know if it's appropriate or inappropriate to express a personal opinion as opposed to an opinion from sitting on the Planning Commission.
I think that is probably, you are expressing it as an individual. We could
somebody
say.
who's lived in Laramie for 34 years.
Why don't we actually, since that will be an individual opinion, why don't we save that until public comment at the end, and you can share it at that point. That way it will kind of fall into the public comment piece. Hang on to it, and we will for sure do.
So if there is going to be a public consultation process, I can see there will be a strong effort made by the company that has an interest in this, that basically has a monopoly on the large hoardings in town. And I think it's important that some information, independent information, is made available to the public. And I'd like to say some of that now. Is that okay?
Is this your personal perspective?
No, these are
Or is
facts.
this,
These are facts.
okay, but are you coming to this as Planning Commission or as yourself as an individual?
What I'm saying is, what I would like to say is that we have heard a lot of information about the importance of advertising to promote business. And I'd like to provide some information for the group that I
Sure.
would like to go before the public when this is considered.
You can bring that forward now as part of just information.
There are cities which ban digital billboards or strictly control them. Houston, Denver, St. Louis, Kansas City, San Francisco, Rapid City, and Madison. There are states which ban all billboards, Vermont, Alaska, Hawaii, and Maine. And as far as I know, businesses have not collapsed in any of those 4 states. I was wondering today, as I was walking with my dog, where are there places where there is no advertising? I could think of 4. Wilderness, churches, I hope, kindergartens, and graveyards. I think that's pretty much it. In the 1970s, this is from Dr. Google, the average person was exposed to between 500 and 1,600 ads per day. In 2021, the number was 6,000 to 10,000 ads per day. The number of advertisements we're exposed to is now remarkable. We're exposed to them in podcasts, doctors' offices, benches at bus stops, airport terminals, mail. I thought of bringing in my mail today just to show how many ads we could get. Digital newspapers, PBS, commercial cinemas, gas stations, sportswear and athletes, elevators and search engines. In other words, we are being constantly inundated with advertisements, and I wonder whether we need more. That's it.
Yes, Mr. Moody.
I don't know whether
Oh,
whether council has seen the staff report that was presented to Planning Commission for what's in front of you, which is on non-conformities and the process of changing the process and the text of non-conformities. The staff provides 5 reasons in here, and they're solid as far as I could tell. And I hope if you haven't seen this, that you do look at it. It's very much to what John has said about that the community was, that billboards were prohibited, and there must be a reason for that in the comp plan, and we were, following directions. But these are solid recommendations or findings of fact and conclusions that we based our recommendation on. And this is what's before you is about non-conformities, and there's as I understand it, there's a very rigid grandfather of if you change anything, it's a prohibited use at the moment. And so if there's a change, you have to say no to it. It's pretty simple, unless you go and just, you can say no to this and then go through the comp plan and change, find out what Laramie wants, find out if there's, some modification to pro-business or the whole billboard prohibit that currently exists. And then bring them back in based on what the comp plan says. But I find it difficult to say yes to what is presented in front of you.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to hold tight for just a second, Councilor Newman. I'm wondering if, as we think about this, because we aren't voting tonight, right, and this will be coming forward May 20th, the current timeline, does it make sense to, and it kind of sounds like we have kind of some split feelings on where we should go with this, does it make sense to, at that May 20th meeting, have a few motions, one that is maybe moving toward waiting to see what the comprehensive comp plan comes up with and seeing if the council wants to vote on that, and then another motion that wants to move forward with Lamar and these billboards as they are now, and we at that time, this has given us time to kind of think through some of this, we at that time vote on whatever, those are perhaps what I'm hearing are potentially two possible motions. We vote on those motions, which at that time gives us the direction for moving forward.
Vice Mayor, can you clarify your motion, the motion that you were talking about?
So it sounds like, and Councilor Newman, do you want to add? Go for it, please.
Just so we're all aware, that's what this work session is for, is so we can have motions. And I am totally okay with having, right, and I appreciate staff, and I've never said I haven't, right? And I get hate for that, by the way. But that's why we're here, right? Staff give us as a recommendation, and that's why I wanted planning here to help us, because it won't go back to them, and it won't go back to you guys unless we
change code.
Change it, right? But that's not, no, even if we change it, whatever our motions are, it still doesn't go back, which is why I wanted them here, unless we change the whole code, right?
Correct.
Which is not what the original motion was. So unless we deny that, and then we want to change code, then it will go back.
Correct.
So I am okay with a couple motions, which makes sense, right? I also want to make, and I hate to be this guy, I'm from Kansas City. There are digital billboards. I Googled it. They can't add new ones, but there are digital billboards there. I wanted to clarify that because I'm from there. But I think having those additional, like, hey, like, maybe this is a way that we go, or no, we say no completely, is something that we should probably be looking at. And in my opinion, we need to keep Lamar out of this conversation. Does council and does planning and zoning want digital billboards in the city of Laramie? And my counter to waiting for the comprehensive plan is, this is my 4th meeting about digital billboards. How many people have we had show up and talk about this? So what is the chance that more people are going to show up for the comprehensive plan just for the digital billboard aspect? So I am okay with the couple motions, but we need to make sure that we know that's why we're here. In the public, this will be the 4th time, actually more, because you guys have public comment, right? So, and you've had, what, a couple, 3 meetings about it. So there's 7 that the public could have come and talked. I wanted to put that out there.
Yes, please,
Mayor,
Mr. Manager.
Just to address Chris's point, we are, as a planning commission, are constrained by the LMC that we have to take those 5 recommendations for a non-conforming use as, Bible verse. And in my opinion, I thought Lamar was fine on at least 2, and the 3rd one was argumentative, but we did not meet all 5. Right, and if you don't meet all 5, and we've had this happen before on other things, you have to meet all 5 of these requirements, and if you don't, we are constrained to deny it, and that's all we can do. I mean, it's just the way the code is written. So regardless of, that you'd have to pack a big lunch and walk a long way to find somebody who's more pro-business than me. But, we were constrained by the code, by the Laramie Municipal Code. So if you're going to make motions and you don't want to, and to allow this, we can't change it. If it comes back to us, we have to still follow those same 5 rules. So if you want to change it, you're going to have to get staff and work it out and write it so that it makes sense. But I also, like I said earlier, want you to ask that you look at all the ramifications of what the change could bring. So that's pretty much it for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So kind of coming back to this, and one thing I will note, one thing about the comprehensive plan is that staff goes out into the community to seek that input, right? So it's a little bit different than people having to come to the meeting. They are out at the farmers markets, out at the Trinity, holding those public meetings. So I think there is a little bit more opportunity. But again, kind of coming back, if we can have a few amendments ready, or direction ready for planning by the May 20th meeting. One, which it sounds like Councilor Lockhart has an idea on, if he wants to get that ready to share with Nancy on just addressing Lamar specifically. I think it was Councilor Bowling and Vigil who brought up having the waiting until the comprehensive plan is complete before making any decision on billboards and whether we want to change code at all. If we don't want to change code at all, then we're right back to this position, right, of making the decision on the Lamar billboards. Are there other possible amendments that Nancy could be ready for, and did that help clarify?
Vice Mayor, if there are any amendments that deal outside of the municipal code revision that is before you, please, please, please make sure that you include Bob on that, because
work those out.
Then it's not going to be germane to the topic that's coming back before the council on May 20th, which means we probably can't address it under this item. Okay. And so I just want to make sure that we're clear that any amendments that come on May 20th need to be relevant to original ordinance 2102.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. Any other comment here before I go to public comment? Yes, Mr. Moody.
Your Honor. Derek, do you have any microphone? Do you have any perspective on what it was in the current comp plan that an ordinance of prohibiting billboards, what that was based on? Was it public input, or, did it just something that the planning department just thought was what Laramie wanted without it being a public input? Any perspective on how that prohibition was laid down?
He's in there, so if it's all right, we'll have the same answer. But I mean, yeah, it's dated, right, through you, Vice Mayor, but it is a dated plan. But any comprehensive planning effort is based entirely on the public engagement phase 1 process that was done. So I can assure these two bodies that the plan or the recommendations and the chapters that were written for the comprehensive plan were based on public input received. Now, I would have to take a look, and maybe Derek does know this better, as far as survey responses received and so forth, but that is just standard practice. It's very much staff and usually consultants driving the questions and creating the surveys, but it's really the policy recommendations in comprehensive plans are, if done well, right, and correctly, are based on the public input received.
Great, thanks.
I managed to get out. No, and I think just to follow up to that is, remember the comprehensive plan is not a regulatory document, right? It's not code. However, this city and the council and the planning commission spent almost 2 years in 2012 with a whole specialized committee focused on signage. And the sign code you have was, a very robust process with, literally you guys had like 12 or 13 meetings between the two bodies just to go over sign code. So, I mean, what the sign code is a result of all those processes. You know, the comprehensive plan providing broad guidance, and then, you know, business owners and people and concerned citizens and everybody really being part of, you know, that sign code process was called the SORT force, if you want to know. You can find stuff online about it, but that's really what that's really what it was focused on. It's all about the sign code, because when we updated the code in 2010, signs seemed to be a really hot button issue, and because of that, the council chose to pull that out of the code update and did it as a whole separate piece in a separate 2-year process. So, just for context and background.
Thank you. All right. So to the point, if you've got an amendment to make for that May 20th, take it to Bob, share it with Nancy so everybody's prepared. Now to public comment on this item. Yes, please.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Megan Getz. I just wanted to follow up quickly to make sure, I think what Commissioner Moody was referring to, keep in mind there were 2 things before Planning Commission and Board of Adjustment. There was a request for a variance, which is the 5 criteria you were referring to. This is the text amendment that has a different opportunity for consideration before you. So I just wanted to point out that difference, that the verbose conversation that Commissioner Matamore was referring to as far as whether the Planning Commission agreed Lamar met 5 of those criteria was in reference to the variance application, not the text amendment. So that was the only thing I wanted to provide clarification.
Perfect. Thank you.
And if I could, Your Honor, if I could clarify that, the
microphone.
Well, I guess this is, so what I was referring to were staff recommends denial of the text amendment application based on the following considerations. The five things. It wasn't a strict, these all have to be adhered to, which was part of the variance. But
this was their outline.
But just for the text amendment, planning staff provided these 5 considerations, which are more broad-based in nature than the specific variance.
Great. Thank you. Yes, sir. Come on forward and state your name, please.
Chris Stratton, Laramie 24/7. Comments that I can think of. I start back at looking at the 1800s, and you look at the old buildings, etc., that all of the windows are boarded up or bricked in because of the window tax. And unfortunately, it seems like the city of Laramie and the way that they are trying to do downtown, etc., goes back to those simple things. It's restricting business consistently, making it into a conformity action, and not looking at business and where they need to go. On the end of digital signs in Denver, if we really want to go into that, just looking into it, yes, Aurora campus is a non-digital area. The amount of litigation that's currently going on in that is amazing, and I hope for the businesses like Lamar, etc., to go on. Whenever it comes down to signs, etc., in downtown, if you have the same digital signage that Lamar is stating, and if you would put it into effect, then yes, it would be not flashy, not jumping around. It's going to be maybe 2-3 images, a lot like Dairy Queen is currently. We are in 2025, not 1800s, and we should not be doing the 1800s things. We need to see business in this town. We need to see advertisements for nonprofits, etc., in this town. And yet we're pushing back into the 1800s in half of what we do for downtown and the city. It's kind of sad that we want to see an 1800s town in 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stratton. Anyone else with public comment? Welcome. Please state your name.
My name is Eric Henderson, and in observation months ago and review of packet information, one thing that strikes me as blatantly absent is in regards to Gabathuler's presentation of safety being a consideration. I haven't seen nor heard from the Traffic and Safety Commission. Is that body still existing in the city? If so, where's the position from that, and could that be available for May 20th?
Great, thank you. Any other public comment? All right. With that, do I need a motion to adjourn?
We have to go to housing now.
Oh, sorry. I was going to maybe break so that if the planning and zoning want to not stick around, you're welcome to stick around.
Should I ask the planning commission if they wish to adjourn at this point?
Sure, that'd be great.
Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn the planning commission from this work session.
I move that we adjourn.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you.
You again.
We are adjourned.
We'll just take 2 minutes for these folks to move if we need to. Okay, we are now moving on to the summary housing work session. We have switched our agenda and listened to the billboard piece before, so if you are just catching it, you'll have to rewind on YouTube. But summary housing work session, and now turning it over to Director Tini. Welcome.
Chair, Commission, thank you. Let's see, clicker. All right. Vice Chair and Vice Mayor, Council. So tonight, what we'll be doing, it's a little bit different than some of the past housing presentations that we've given. This housing presentation that we're going to give here is really a status report on many of the studies and planning efforts that have been done. If you're really, really interested in some of the changes and a lot of the details related to changes that have been made by this council specifically, back in June of last year, we did a presentation that has some similar information, some slide updates and things like that, that really hits on the details, the changes that were actually made, updates to codes and things like that. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that in this presentation kind of near the end, but just putting that out there that if you haven't watched that work session, especially for our new council members that were not council members at the time, there's a lot of really good information. It might be a slightly bit dated in some of the numbers, but very applicable in the types of changes and codes that were applied then. So really, like I said, we're going to talk about just some of the backgrounds, studies, and plans. We're going to talk a little bit about a quick summary of the changes that we've made that have kind of influenced housing related to code. Talk a little bit about changes on housing quality, and then kind of where are we at right now with housing. And that kind of 4 slides, a slide that the city manager and I have continued to kind of like toss in this every single housing report, and we just kind of keep updating the numbers. So it'll be a little familiar, but I think it's a nice slide that kind of starts to summarize some of the progress we've made. So 7 planned studies that have been done, not just by the city of Laramie, but by the state of Wyoming as well, really kind of provide the framework for housing and kind of what the housing status is for us here in Laramie, Albany County, kind of southeast Wyoming, and the state of Wyoming. And all of these reports, I'm hitting the high points, like the real high points. Many of these reports have a significant amount of data that if you're really interested in housing, I would suggest you dig into these. There's the studies that have been done at our local level, kind of starting even with that very first one, which is the 2015 housing study, really data-heavy plan, all the way into like the statewide housing strategic action plan, which is this last plan here that we'll talk a little bit about. I mean, chock full of data, but also really providing kind of a comparison, like how are we doing compared to other counties in Wyoming? How are we compared to other regions in Wyoming? And so to really just kind of start to jump in, let's talk about really what I would consider probably the first major study done by this city when it comes to housing. And this was done in 2015, and this was observed and done for the sole intent to understand housing in Laramie. This plan and this study is extremely data heavy. Lots of numbers, lots of graphs, but done by a professional housing consultant group, Hannah Keelan. They really were looking at what are our needs through 2030, and they came up with these kind of 5 key areas. One was community engagement, making sure the community understood what is housing in our community and how does it play a role in all the areas that housing touches, economics, just livability, all of those areas. Community profile analysis, this is where they really dig into our community, demographics, population growth, age, everything, like kind of the numbers, right, of our people. Housing demand and needs assessment, You've heard many of these figures and topics come back before you in many of the different studies that we've had. You'll see kind of over on the right-hand slide, we've preached the number 4,106 new housing units by 2030. Those are kind of some of those, demands and needs. You'll also, in this study, there's a lot of really good information about types of housing. What types of housing were people wanting, but also what types of housing do we need to kind of catch up to this number here? Site and land use evaluation, they provided guidance into how land use and sites within the community are either constrained or not constrained when it comes to housing, and really providing this ultimate 5-year housing action plan. The 5-year housing action plan is something that we've followed. We've hit a lot of the measurables within that plan. And so, things we're seeing, population growth, there's the new housing units. We saw in this plan lack of affordable renter and owner-occupied housing, specifically for the low and moderate income. We noted UW's kind of contribution and impact on our housing, creating a high rental demand. We saw that many of our housing is more than 50 years old. That kind of speaks to that quality of housing. That's something that comes out through a lot of these plans, and you'll see even at the state level, many of the studies. High home prices were identified. We noted that water, sewer, and transportation infrastructure does limit housing development. That's going to be kind of a constant theme you're going to hear through a lot of these studies. And then also too, just how do we go into action, and how do we form things like public partnerships, zoning changes, and a lot of the other things that were in here. And those are also consistent themes that you'll hear a little bit about through this presentation. So that's like I said, brief summary, but this is the study you want to look at if you want to know the numbers for Laramie. Dated a little bit in terms of the year. However, the numbers are getting better, and that's an unfortunate thing to say, but probably the numbers that you see in here are probably, worse off now because we've had a lot of things happen. I mean, since 2015 that were probably never even thought of to happen at this time. So. The next one, the 2018 Albany County Housing Report. This is a report that was done by the state of Wyoming. This is looking at all of Albany County, but a few things I want to point out. There's some really interesting data in here just about the high net commuter outflow, indicating that there's a lack of jobs fitting the skill set or pay. You're going to note that in a study that's coming up, which is our Thrive Community and Economic Development study that was done for the city of Laramie, that was another major item that was noted. Also, I think just this other bullet point, one adult making $1,603, or 2 adults and a child household essentially making $3,841 is needed to live without assistance. And I think that just tries to put into perspective just the numbers and kind of how housing is affecting the livability within our community. You'll see in some of the graphs that were provided here, just some interesting, numbers about Albany County, 51% renter rate. We have a high 17.3% poverty rate, so we're about 6% higher than the rest of the state of Wyoming. It says here, Albany County has the highest poverty rate in Wyoming. And so we're going to be, that's another, just an issue that we have to combat when we talk about housing. Low unemployment, but then also too, it kind of, it helps break out, what does someone need to have in terms, what monthly max payment can they afford when they're looking at something, when they're talking about their housing. It kind of breaks that down based upon population to kind of see where does our population land in terms of what they can afford truly for their housing. Once again, this report, if you want to compare to other counties in the Wyoming, every single county got one of these. And so it's very interesting to see and kind of compare yourself. And actually a little bit later when we talk about an updated study to this, they kind of compared some of us, they kind of grouped us into the southeast region. And there's some interesting comparables that I'll touch on when we get there.
Director Tinney?
Yeah.
And maybe this is more for city manager, but can you remind us, I feel like you shared with us once that that poverty rate is not necessarily due to college students either, that there was, can you remind us of that information?
Sure. If you look, I could send you a page number reference if you'd like, but the Economic Development Plan attempted to exclude students and look only at working age individuals and folks who were full-time employed. And what it found is even amongst our young professionals, so people that are full-time in the workforce, no longer in college, at WyoTech, at LCCC, and engaging in any educational attainment activities, that their average rates of pay were lower than all of the surrounding counties, including Laramie County, Laramie County, Colorado. And so we had a wage issue that was, in fact, driving lower median incomes amongst full-time employed working age individuals.
Okay, thank you for that reminder.
Let's see, did I go, whoops, yeah, one too many there. So right here, this is the study that the city manager was just speaking about, the Thrive Laramie Community in an Economic Action Strategy. And this plan here was really identified what it says, 6 key areas for the Laramie's economy. One of those was housing. So one of 6 key areas for economic development within our community is housing. How do we improve housing? Because it's so important and critical to a good economic environment within our community. The other key areas, speaking of, increasing wages. So it was identified in the plan as one of the key 6 areas as low wages resulted in difficulty in achieving things like housing, retaining employment, and people within the community, the brain drain of the young people leaving the community after college, things like that. Other areas, town-gown relationship, innovation and entrepreneurship, arts and culture and infrastructure. But really what I think is important there is just that it does note within this plan housing as a key component, and that being identifying in this plan, what do we do when it comes to the economic vitality of our community in terms of housing? And so it talks about code updates that improve policy related to housing and development, increasing financing options for housing, and also it kind of grouped in public-private partnerships, that's the PPP there. Increasing the pipeline of developers and laborers. It was noted in the plan that there's just not enough people to, as we call, swing the hammer. Doesn't matter if there's lots, doesn't matter if there's building material, it doesn't matter if the people want to build or buy a house, but if there isn't somebody to build the place, it can't get put up. Identifying infill opportunities. This is a kind of maximizing existing infrastructure and, using what we already have as a community to improve housing conditions by providing housing where there's already land, there's already roads, there's already water lines. We're already serving with the police and the fire, and it doesn't really expand the need for the community. And then really the last piece there in this that comes out of this economic study is really understanding how the University of Wyoming affects, long and short-term, impacts on our housing. Everything from rentals to the dormitories to staff to, it's broader than just that students rent apartments, right? It's a much broader and bigger discussion than that. Once again, though, remember this study was not a housing-focused study, but it was identified as important to the economy. So there's a lot of ties, but there's also, it was not directed at trying to fix housing. It was trying to help our community understand how housing plays a role in the broad economy. So, with that though, that's really where Laramie, we took the next step as a community and said, housing is one of the pieces that were identified in that study. We had seen through the 2015 plan and some of these other plans that housing was going to be an important topic for us and as a community. And so we began working on the Laramie housing strategy. And what we did is we worked with a consultant group called Community Builders. They're out of Colorado. And they work with communities and try to help them identify how to essentially right-size their codes, their policies, for housing in the changing housing market for your community. And so they had come to Laramie. They actually were working with the state prior to 2020. And they developed this Laramie housing strategy. And through the Laramie housing strategy, they noted three main challenges. Income to home cost, so reoccurring theme, right? Not making enough money, costs of housing is high, so you're not able to rectify that. Lack of choice and high land costs. So lack of choice being just supply. Not everybody can afford a single-family home, or maybe wants a single-family home. Maybe there are different needs at different times of your life, whether you're a recent college graduate or an aging millennial waiting to downsize, right? Like all of those components played a role there. And then high land and high construction costs. That was another thing that was identified during this process. And so there's a little few facts in there, but solving what was identified also in this is that solving the housing crisis within Laramie is not going to come through single-family home development. It just can't. We just don't have the capability to do that. We can't put up enough single-family homes. And so really what it identifies is it talks about that missing middle housing, and it's a term that we've heard a little bit, and just to kind of frame for this conversation, it's that housing that's not a single-family home, and it's not your big apartment complex. It's kind of everything in between. It's a 4-unit building, in your neighborhood. It's an 8-unit building over here, or 6-unit townhouse or something like that. It's that middle of the road, may provide you a stepping stone into maybe that future single-family home. So during the study, they also did what they called kind of a red flags in the code review. And they identified these three main key items. One, high parking requirements, so the requirement to put more parking in. One, it's costly to put asphalt down and deal with the water and the drainage and things like that. But two, it uses up land. If that land can be used for more housing units, typically your return on your investment of that land and the development and stuff is a little bit better if you're even getting 1 more unit to rent or 2 more units to rent. Excessive minimum unit size and lot requirements. They had looked at our lot size requirements at the time. They were a little bit large. There was also we had some unique language within our code that restricted the number of units based upon total square footage. And so it really limited development options on properties, and that there was no permissions for accessory dwelling units within our code. So that's really what came out of this study. But what the city of Laramie did is we wanted to take it one step further, and so we continued some work with community builders, and we developed the Laramie Code Audit. And what we did is we took that one red flag section within the last plan, and we said, look at our code and tell us all the things that we should probably change to try to best get ourselves into a place of efficiency related to housing. If we want to make changes to our housing code, how do we do it? Where do we make those changes? And so that is really what the focus of this plan was. They focused on three of the zoning districts, the R2, the R3, and the DC zoning districts. They focused on these areas because it's the logical location where missing middle housing was. I'll fast forward a little bit, if you remember as council, for those of you who are here, and if for the new members, it kind of happened right there as you probably were thinking about running and such, was the council even chose to dive into the single-family home discussions in all of our residential zoning districts. So, they even took it a little bit further than this study recommended. But in this plan, they took a look at, where do we need to make code changes? They also, in this plan, provided some case studies. They showed actual properties in Laramie and showed how these code changes would actually affect those properties from current code to the code if the changes were made. And it really helped provide some context as far as how our existing codes were restraining certain property development, but also how certain codes could really open the door and provide for unique and, housing that was at least desirable based upon what the plans were recommending. Once again, all these changes were increasing housing affordability. And so, we talked a lot about accessory dwelling units, small bungalows, and mid-density housing, a reduction of lot sizes to increase affordability, reducing setbacks and lot widths requirements, permitting ADUs, reducing parking requirements, and modifications to the downtown commercial zoning district to promote downtown housing. Literally every single one of these has been done. And I'll just tell you that that's not a small feat. And it was something that many communities really look to Laramie in Wyoming right now and are trying to figure out how to do the same thing. So,
Councilor Doherty.
Are those the same kind of recommendation that the state legislature has been talking about, stuff that we've already implemented about reducing costs?
yeah, I mean, I think there's been a lot of bills proposed, so I won't say it's like every single thing, but many of the items that you see here in our code audit are, I would say, commonly found in other communities' codes that the state of Wyoming was looking at specifically and potentially making changes at the state level to require these things. They had some ADU bills going through. They weren't really talking about parking requirements, but they were definitely, this is the area that they were talking about, as well as with the Growth Lab. They were a group that was out of Harvard working with the state of Wyoming to try to identify and figure out areas for, fixes within codes, not only at the state level, but at local levels that they could implement kind of as a best practices. And so many of these things are the same. So with that, really, I'm going to jump over into this 2024 statewide housing needs assessment. This is really kind of what I would consider some good updated numbers that I think parallel a little bit of our 2015 study that we did, but also provide some updated numbers to that. I think it's the 2018 Albany County Housing Report. And in this report, you'll kind of see some of the things like Albany County, as a total estimation between 4,000 and 7,000 units needed by 2030. That's not even as good of the numbers as we were seeing in 2015, so it's even more than we are anticipating. We're seeing home ownership drop. Between 2010 and 2020, a 3% drop. We're almost below 50%, so we're at 51% in 2020 for home ownership. All other counties in the southeast region are seeing actually increases in home ownership. You want to typically be trending up. You're never going to get to 100%, but you want to be moving up and down, but in that like kind of 60 and 75% range, hopefully. Once again, Albany County poverty rate per this is at that 24%. So,
can I interrupt you for just a minute, Councilor Newman?
Do you think that's because of like LCCC, UW, and WildTech that we're seeing the downtick in ownership?
I think probably what, if you look at these studies, right, low wages and high costs kind of work against you to actually own a home. Also, though, remember, home ownership isn't always single-family home ownership on a piece of property. And I think that when you have a community that maybe lacks in that area, right, you're cutting out a segment of the population that maybe wants to own a condo, right? Condo in an 8-unit building. Or something like that. So if you don't have that supply, I think that potentially works against you in that home ownership area.
If I could just tag on, if that would be okay, Mayor, that is a nationwide trend actually, and they attribute it to, as Derek said, demand and supply being exceedingly tight, which affects pricing, but also interest rates going up, which makes homeownership unaffordable for a whole new group of people who maybe were on the margin from a financial standpoint previous to interest rates increase.
Yeah, and I think I would say, like, nationally, this is we're fitting in nationally, but it's not a national trend we want to fit into, I don't think.
We like to do better than that.
Exactly, yeah, but I think it's worth pointing out, I think, just so that we have a better understanding of what's happening, right? We do see some positive things. We have job growth is up 12% since 2010. You know, we're also, you've got Albany County has the, highest home construction in the region between Laramie and Albany County. That's really a good factor too. So we're putting up units, right? Like, we're putting up units, but we're not keeping pace. As the city manager noted, we have high rents and low vacancy. So finding a house is difficult. Sometimes that works against you. And, if you just don't want to put up with the process, right, you might just not fight it and just keep renting. But also, it was noted, aging housing, so reoccurring theme, infrastructure costs, reoccurring theme, the University of Wyoming's impact, common in every college community. And then housing costs, are some of those main issues that are identified. And I think, once again, I'm just, pointing it out, consistent themes that fall into these kind of housing studies. What's interesting too in this graph, it's not the best graph in terms of like readability, but one thing I want to point out, that dark blue segment of the graph is your single family home units that are being built. What's interesting though, as you see, we're not seeing a lot of those other colors. And we know that that's problematic because it's not adding in those units that provide for that flexibility or option in purchasing. I'll point out though, you'll see some really big spikes in the 5+ unit and above. Those are times in which this county, and I'll just say it's happening in the city, these things aren't, we're not seeing massive multifamily buildings in the county, but those are when it was like Laramie kind of hit those points in our growth where student housing properties looked favorably, and we were kind of invested in. So you see that one in 2012, that other one I think lands in like 2005, and that matches right up with the time we saw some of our newer student housing come into play. So.
Yes, Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Could you just describe that new university housing? Are those some of those bigger complexes, by like Pilot Hill and that area now?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Yes, correct. That's you've got kind of the one south of Ridley's. You have the one up by Pilot Hill. You have a couple of complexes that added in West Laramie. You had some dorm construction actually with Wyotech at the time. So it's kind of all of those pieces kind of coordinating, giving you those spikes there. So.
Thank you.
Anybody else? It's also interesting that our job growth went up by 12%, but I'm assuming then those jobs just weren't the high-paying jobs. Is that a fair assumption?
I don't recall in this report that it pulled those numbers out. I want to say in this next study that I'll talk about, which is this statewide strategic housing action plan, it does talk about types of jobs and what were added, what we saw increases and decreases. I'd have to pull it up and dig into it, but there is some data in this study that would speak to that. What? The ED plan too. Yeah, and the economic development plan that we did. We have that, if you remember, income and wages was a piece of that, and it does talk about in there what types of jobs you would need to have to be able to afford, for instance, a home to rent and to own. And it's actually kind of surprising. You see some jobs that you would think to yourself, man, if you're a nurse, you should be able to own a house in this town, and that wasn't always the case. And so there's some striking numbers in there. So Yeah. So really, last major kind of study that we kind of used to kind of provide some of this framework for housing is this new study that just came out, which is the Wyoming Statewide Strategic Housing Action Plan. This is a pretty big, decent document, and it's got a lot of really good information in it. There's a lot of comparables. But really, this is kind of, like I said, it's a follow-up to that statewide housing needs assessment. And it talks about housing shortages across the state, affordability, low wages, infrastructure issues, how housing affects the economy, regulatory reform, that's part of the kind of the state discussion that we were earlier having, how we can use public-private partnerships, improving existing housing within your community that already exists, and then how does the state play a role in the funding priorities. And so, once again, we start seeing things come out of this report. So gross median rent, $922 for Albany County and for the city of Laramie. Median home value, $283,000. When you look at these numbers, whether you can actually get that or not. This is what based upon our incomes, right? We see a median home value change up 28% in 5 years. That's very difficult to keep up with even if you have a good job, even if you can anticipate for that type of growth. Once again, we're seeing almost half of our renters and almost 20% of our homeowners are cost burdened. What that means is that they're spending more of their income than you would traditionally spend, which is usually about 30% on housing. So when you have those numbers so high, you've got to remember if they're spending more on their housing, they're not spending within the greater economy, whether it's on necessities like your clothing or medical, but also on things that, like coffee or your restaurant or whatever you want to do in terms of entertainment. And so, that does create issues within the economy and economic growth. Another item that I think is really important to point out is the state of Wyoming spends less per capita on housing than almost every state in the United States. And so that places us in a difficult position when we as a community looks to try to find avenues to improve our housing. Often the state is not, at least for Wyoming, going to be necessarily always an avenue we can rely on. Now, the state does have options for us, and our community tries to utilize as many of those as we can. But I think it's important to note that many states have a lot more tools, funding sources, and opportunities for communities and localities to use to try to help themselves, essentially. The other item that really came out of this is the cost of infrastructure as a major barrier to housing. And so as we see increased costs, as we see things like tariffs where you don't know, what things might cost next week, all affect the predictability and development. And so when we talk about a developer deciding to invest and provide, whether it's lots or build houses for the community in some aspect or another, predictability is usually key. And when that predictability is more difficult, it's really hard to know whether that's a good idea or not. And so, because these things also take time, just because something is one price today, it may not be the next. And what we're seeing just across the board when it comes to infrastructure, like paving roads, putting water lines and sewer lines in, those costs are traditionally going up. And so that definitely, gets passed on. So really those are kind of the larger framework of studies that we kind of use to provide guidance and things. And so what I wanted to do, this came out of that the housing supply study that was recently done. And I think it's interesting to kind of look at that bottom bar there. And this is for the whole Western United States. And this is really trying to understand, what is really actually affecting housing. And what you're going to see across all regions is construction obstacles are a major issue, and financing challenges. Makes up almost 50% of the kind of housing hurdles that we as a community deal with. We play limited roles in those two areas. Definitely as we start to get further into the graph, so land use, zoning, and permitting obstacles, 16%, definitely a realm of this body, your planning commission staff, right? Something maybe you can have more effect on. Overwhelming amount of housing needs. This is just dealing with the sheer issue of how all the areas of housing. Some of this falls into your realm, probably some of it does not. Some of these things are probably largely outside of your control. Political or community opposition. Housing is often a really hot button issue. You know, this council has seen it, past councils have seen it, staff has seen it. Definitely plays a role in predictability and wanting to invest in this type of a development. And then we have state. In the West, our state governments definitely have a larger hand in how it addresses housing, both positive and negatively. And so I think it's just an interesting way to kind of provide some context that, not everything is in our control. When we look at these, we can keep doing studies, we can keep looking at things, but there are definitely a lot of things that are out of our control. But, this body, this community has definitely taken a much more proactive approach than a lot of communities have when it comes to housing. And so, so to kind of quickly hit, like I said, this presentation wasn't on the things that we've done, but what have we done? We have online submittal and application process. You don't have to come into the office. You can submit, pay, do all of that online. We have schedules published so that you can actually go through and say, if I turn something in and I do what I'm supposed to, what's my potential schedule look like? When might I be before Planning Commission and City Council? We provided changes to all of the downtown commercial changes that were recommended in our studies related to parking and building height. We created parking reductions across the board for every single zoning district and every single residential type use within our code. We reduced setbacks, lot widths, lot sizes for every single zoning district within the community. We permitted accessory dwelling units in all single-family zoning districts. Your multifamily zoning districts already allow essentially what would be maybe thought of as an ADU, but it's just another unit on the property. We've developed an urban renewal authority and the ability for property owners to petition and go through the tax increment financing process. This is a funding mechanism for property owners and potentially groups of property owners to use to help fund some of those high cost things. So remember, infrastructure was that kind of common theme. That would be a logical one that TIF would be used for. Public-private partnerships. We've successfully used public-private partnerships in commercial realms. That was kind of like the Kmart project and things like that. But the city of Laramie is working on the North 4th Street project, as well as potentially Slade Elementary School, and this public-private partnership to how do we work with other community members, both private and public organizations to promote this housing that we need for our community. We've continued to work with the Growth Lab and the state of Wyoming, working on legislative actions that are related to housing, whether it's, things related to the Urban Renewal Authority and changes that were proposed then, to different housing regulations. This legislative session, a lot of that did not ever make it through, but there were definitely a lot of talks about that. You as a city council have put housing as one of your larger goals in a lot of different areas within your broader set of goals. That's not new either. Your past, councils have also considered housing for many years as one of your high priority goals. And so what that has helped allow staff to know that type of guidance, to understand that that's a direction that the council wants us to be focused on. We've made changes to the use table for uses that aid housing. This is things like live-work changes and things like that that can allow for somebody to eventually, or maybe potentially provide income within their house so that they can maybe offset some of those mortgage costs. We've continued to work with the Laramie Chamber Business Alliance on what we're kind of affectionately calling Where Does Housing Live, and trying to figure out how do we better understand the actual housing market and all the housing issues for our community, from these studies and things that gives us guidance, but also too, how do we effort that for whether it's the, developer, a property owner, the city, a council, and really, where is that clearinghouse going to be? And we think that that might be a tool that could be helpful for the community at large. We have a really positive group right now working in this Housing Coalition Working Group, made up of a wide range of members of our community that just, I would say, care about housing and understand that housing is important, and they're looking at different aspects of our community, and these are people that have, they're no vested interest other than wanting to make our community better, and that is something that's very unique to Laramie. To my knowledge, we're not seeing this happening in other communities. And really what, this group hopes to get out of it is some guidance and some direction on maybe some implementation strategies, right? Even some low-hanging fruit. Any movement towards a better housing environment. We also have, developed the rental housing code. The rental housing code really focused on that quality of housing and improving conditions. And so, all just kind of a quick list of just some of the things that you've done as a council and as a community. So, to quickly touch on, we have done changes to improve the quality of housing. Insufficient and poor quality housing was just noted many times throughout this whole study as to something that needed to be addressed. And so, when we start looking at our rental housing, we do have minimum standards for habitation. Right now, as of about a week and a half ago, we've got 1,521 licenses representing a total of 4,509 dwelling units. So we've gone through some complaints, 23 complaints so far. So that's that part of that process of allowing our renters to file complaints so that things can get fixed and so that living conditions can be habitable. We've also done some quality of housing things related to contractor licensing, proof of competency and a licensing process for the people that are doing work within our community. Improves the quality of workmanship and professionalism. This also protects property owners and the people that are having these contractors do work. What's interesting is, so we have this, last year we had 382 licensed contractors in the city. That was up about 20-some from 2023. And right now, as of today, we've got 340 licensed contractors to date. So we're not seeing a decrease in people wanting to work in our community and getting their contractor license, and that's exactly what we want to see. And it was definitely one of the things that I think we heard that maybe would be a deterrent. The numbers aren't showing that, which is great. One thing I'll note, though, is in this 340 is actually about 25 to 30 contractors less that are just sole utility contractors. We pulled those out because they don't build things. They put water lines and sewer lines in our roads and stuff, and we didn't feel like that was a very genuine number to put in. So you'll kind of see, like, maybe next year that number may be staying the same, I'm guessing, because we're going to lose that group of people. So and kind of the last slide that I've got here is, just, where are we right now with housing? So, like I said, we went through all these studies, we've got a lot of reports, we've got a lot of data. Really, that's guiding our housing guide direction when we start talking about our comp plans and our studies that we do and our code changes and, different initiatives that staff might be working on, whether it's 4th Street or Slade Elementary School, right? Where are we at with lots? Right now we've got about 129 lots we think are ready to build. We've got, that's up from the last time we did this in June, not significantly, but it's up like 15 or some, just we had some recent final plats that have added lots. I call it the almost online lots. They're waiting for infrastructure to get built and things like that. We actually decreased in this last year. The biggest reason for that is because they actually got the stuff done and they went to the next category when they're ready to build, so, which is actually a good thing. One thing to point out, though, is preliminary plats. When you total up all the lots, we're at 669 build-ready lots that all we have to wait on is for the developer to submit final plats. So, submit the final plat, have it approved by the city council, and build the infrastructure so the people can build houses. That's also up. We had a new preliminary plat adopted, and so it added some lots to that number from the last time in June. We're still averaging about 60 building permits for single-family homes per year. That's kind of our average right now, and 9 multifamily units granted since 2015. That's really that number that you would really hope is higher. That's where we're trying, that's where you gain units. But, so then when we start looking, how does that housing supply look compared to our 2015 housing study? And so we're at 822 units of housing being constructed in Laramie through 2024. Once again, we needed 1,538 units by 2020, and then there's that 4,106 units by 2030. And so when you start looking at the 822, we're in 2024, we're almost, we're halfway through between those 2020 and 2030, and we're not keeping up, right? We're not keeping pace. And then lastly, just to provide some context, all of Albany County since 2019 has seen 340 single-family units and 7 multifamily units. So, just to provide some context of what we're seeing, that's, Centennial, it's everywhere in all of Albany County. So, so with that, that's what we ran through. Like I said, this was really focused on those studies and that data and the information that we use. And so I'd be happy to take any questions. If not, though, what I would say is really, it's not that you don't have enough reading, but if you want some good reading, some of these studies really have some good information. If you like data, I would recommend it. So.
Thank you very much. Any questions from council? Yes, Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Derek. Very informative, and you guys have been working your tail end off, and I appreciate what you guys have done with the studies and trying to make it easier to build. Just that last section right there, what are we going to do different in the next 6 years than we have in the last 4 or 5? What can we do and how can we help to get that 4,000 houses?
If it's okay with the mayor, I guess. Yes. First, I asked Derek, I wanted to could you go back to the last slide, second to last, just the numbers, the 4,000?
Let's see.
Actually,
last slide.
That one there.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah.
Yeah, I counsel through you, Madam Mayor, I wanted to have Derek show the slide I gave you guys in November, and I forgot to send it to him, so my bad. But you'll recall from that slide, like Derek and the planning division have been sort of tracking home units brought online. since 2015, when that original study the city did came out projecting our need through 2020. So I just remind you, and I'm looking here because I think your number's a little different than mine, but when I displayed that slide for you where we needed 4,000 and a few by 2030, we believe we brought on, I don't have the exact number, but enough that we are down to our estimated need from the 2050 study being about 2,600 more units needed. And so that would be 4,100 something originally, 4,106 units originally, less the number that we've tracked since 2015. And so that puts us at about 2,600. And I apologize, I didn't give you that, but I think that is important context. I don't think we should lose sight of the 4,000 because I think, if we have 4,000 housing units, I have no doubt people would come, right? And they would probably buy them if they were attainable housing. But at least I wanted to make sure that we recognize that the changes that the council have made and that the city has worked on we hope have some appreciable effect, and we think we're down to about 2,600 units by 2030. So, and then I'll butt back out.
Councilor Freed.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Mayor. So City Manager, I guess on that note, just to clarify, so the estimation is that we need 2,600 houses now by 2030, and that's because of, from 2015, what's been built or the fluctuations of things, and that's a more accurate number as of 2025, where we think we need to be sitting. Is that correct, remaining?
Yes, I believe so. And through you, Mayor, I'll just restate the slide. So between 2015 and 24, we believe we had 719 new housing units come online. That was 611 single-family, 108 multifamily units. Then from 24 to 25, 6, so to current, about 81 build-ready single-family lots. Now, they need to be built on, right? But they're platted, they're ready. They've been made ready by the City Council. And then we were estimating also another 86 build-ready single-family lots were in the pipeline. I think a lot of that, Derek, was tied to the north side development, which now may be delayed. And then also another 66 housing units that we anticipated at the city's North 4th Street property. We hoped that we'd see that WCDA low-income housing tax credit program funded this year. We did not. Likely we hope next year. So there were some assumptions there that have changed literally since I brought you these numbers in November. But we did, as of November, believe we needed about 2,600 more housing units based on what we knew to be in the pipeline then, and no notable major additional developments have been applied for since then, correct?
Yeah, and I think if you want to look at this slide, so the numbers Janine is stating, if you look at the 822 plus the 129, the residential lots ready to build, plus those 73 and 4 multifamily almost online, gets you about that number that we're talking about here, because when we were talking in that presentation in November, it was the kind of yearly update, right? The end of year update. And what we were trying to show is where are we at when we're actually talking about the ability to put housing units in. And when you start looking, having a build-ready lot is important, right? It means we can get the house up, but what other constraints might there be? Right, and we had talked about the swing of the hammer, and so when you look at those numbers, I think that's probably what we get. If I do the math, but I'm not going to do it up here. So,
other comments or questions from council? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And I think just to address Councilmember Lockhart's question about what do we do, right? I think as this council is seated, and as we probably for this foreseeable future, future housing issues are going to come before you. And I think it's going to be weighing, what those changes might look like in terms of, are we willing to adjust standards to get more housing? Are we willing to adjust quality of, our roads, our landscaping, our building design for housing? I think all of those things potentially could come before this council. Right now, staff is currently working on just another round of housing changes in areas that we've seen some, hiccups and things. does it necessarily swing the pendulum or just move the needle? I think these are all, we're doing a lot of moving the needle towards the right direction, which is good. But I think, too, a lot of these other projects that, you've had Assistant City Manager Feeser working on, with whether it's the Slade Elementary School project, myself and our office in North 4th Street, these are the projects that eventually come before you, also potentially needing approvals, conditional uses, zoning changes, things like that. And I think it's trying to put maybe some of that decision-making in the context of where does it put us in terms of housing, and like a lot of the studies indicated in those areas that we're talking about. And so predictability, I think, for this council, I think, is also an important thing. We've got new members. We have people who, that are sitting up here that they don't know how, they haven't seen you act, right? And that's being kind of frank, but also, too, I think it's important to note that, the development community loves predictability. They don't want to know that there might be the last stand in front of the city council or a planning commission or even at staff level. And so, trying to provide that is something that I think that this body does a good job of, and I think that our community does a good job of. And so, I think these are just kind of like, areas that I think that will likely see housing come before you. So trying to answer that question.
Yeah. If I could add a few things to that too. I think that's where all of our minds have been, even over the last 6 to 9 months, like, what do we do next, right? Because you're just chipping away at it. I know Derek has maybe touched on this, but I want to reiterate it. The thing we know from our 2015 study, and I really loved Wyoming Community Development's study this year because it echoed the same message and reinforced what we've always believed to be true, which is there is no silver bullet to this problem. And there was no silver bullet before COVID for a typical university town with all the typical university town housing challenges. And now what has always been a challenge in Laramie in the 30 years I've lived here and in the 53 years I've lived in Wyoming, has now sort of been exacerbated by a nationwide, regional, and statewide housing problem that used to be even 10 years ago in Wyoming. Jackson and Laramie had housing issues because Jackson is Jackson and we're a university town. The rest of the state was pretty cool, right? But not anymore. So I want to mention one thing that we're going to do in this next year. We have applied for, and I know Council, I mentioned this too, but we've applied for a program that will give us some grant funding of $24,000 this year to try to address this issue through what we envision as sort of a housing administration office. And we've been dancing around the notion that for city government, we can only control government, right? We don't control the private sector. We can't deal with the labor shortage of swinging hammers. We can't deal with the fact that building supplies and materials for some reason cost a lot more in Laramie than they do in Cheyenne and Rawlins. We can't deal with the fact that the banks aren't financing large development projects in a post-COVID space. But what we could do is try to lubricate the machinery around housing development. So what we're going to be looking at is if it might be a feasible approach for us to put together kind of a headhunter for the community that would go out and recruit large-scale housing developers that are very sophisticated, that have access to capital beyond, your local community banks, that sort of thing, that could help lower some of these barriers and maybe form some meaningful public-private partnerships. I characterize the grant that we got as maybe helping us go to the next level from what we've sort of had Todd doing for the last year. Assistant City Manager Feeser's like the housing special projects guy here, right? And so Derek mentioned Slade School and the North 4th Street development and working with the URA, but really maybe going to a 2.0 version of that and formalizing a housing administration headhunter or guru or, a real position that isn't Todd being the Assistant City Manager and the housing guy, that can work with across that public-private divide and really be a little more creative, if you will, and a little nimble and not encumbered with the traditional duties of city management.
Councilor O'Doherty.
Okay. If I could add a little bit to the conversation to Councilor Lockhart's questions to you, Vice Mayor. One of the things that I want to reiterate is that through Janine's leadership, City Manager Jordan's leadership, and Community Economic Development Director Taney's work is we've been laying the seeds for development to occur. Don't set your sights short that we've really not made advancements in this, but we are. Bill Nye is going to get constructed here pretty soon, a section of Bill Nye and Corthell. That includes storms or sanitary sewer that hasn't been in place, which opens up that whole south side of Laramie for development. And we all know that the initial stop for all development is trunk infrastructure. If we can't get trunk infrastructure there, development can't fund itself. And so that's the way that it's opening up. And also with Janine's leadership and through guidance of engineering, the north side water tank project, you know, that provides water to an entire section of this community that doesn't have access to good, clean, quality water. That's going to improve development, and we're starting to see that. And so the Urban Renewal Agency, you know, we haven't had any success yet, but we've only been really going at this for a little bit over a year, and we're planting the seeds, and we keep changing. You know, North 4th Street held up a little bit, so now we are focusing on another project, or Slade holds up, but we're not just resting on our laurels. Everybody's doing everything they can to get those seeds ready for when it rains, and it's coming. I'm going to tell you, it's coming. We're going to see some big changes. You're going to see some development in this community through the work and the leadership of City Manager Jordan, through Community Economic Development Director Taney's work, and it's really going to lead to some major outcomes for this community. I just don't want that to be lost, that we are doing stuff, and you're going to see changes here soon. Okay.
Great. Councilor O'Doherty.
I wanted to raise the issue because new councilors might not be aware of this. Several times since I've been on council, we have considered changes to code that was brought about by developers. So I feel like our staff is, if it's something that's impeding development, then if developers bring it to our building department, you know, like, this is a problem. We've addressed it. They've brought it to council and said, you know, you don't need the road to be this wide or whatever. And that was brought about by private enterprise. And the other thing I just wanted to point out, there's a reason for regulations. And when we send people, firefighters, out into the county, and we have no idea what kind of structural integrity, you know, there are codes, but there's nobody to enforce them in the county. So I just want to put a little plug in there. The reason we have regulations is to keep us safe, because we're a bunch of people crowded into a small area. And so that's it, my little soliloquy. Thanks.
Thanks. Yes, Councilor Newman.
Assistant City Manager, I don't want you to sell yourself short, because you're in that conversation as well. Because I know we've had a few conversations about housing, and I've heard of some work that you're doing with LCBA, with Slade and whatnot. So don't sell yourself short in that conversation.
Yes, Councilor Freed.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Director Tini, I just have a question, and this might be a rudimentary question, or being a new council member, just more about the process of the 669 built-ready homes or preliminary plats awaiting final platting. So could you just briefly walk me through what that looks like, just so I can, when the public asks me there's almost 700 plattable area or plots, what does that mean in simple terms for me?
Yeah, great question. So when you're looking at that number, a preliminary plat is kind of the first step of two steps when you're talking about actually putting lots on the ground for someone to buy. The preliminary plat process is an entitlement process that a property owner and a developer will go through to lay out, think the big picture, where all the roads are going to go, where all the water lines are going to go, how many lots in total on their whole property. A final plat is usually a small piece of that. Very rarely do you have a developer who has the capital and the ability to build all the lots in the subdivision all at once. And so you break it up into small parts. The bigger number there with the preliminary plats is someone has gone through Planning Commission and Council and has done that preliminary layout. After that, all they have to do is come back to this council and to the Planning Commission with the lots that they want to build in that final design for, let's say it's 5 lots or 50 lots or 10 lots. It doesn't matter. It's up to them. They're entitled to follow what we approved at that preliminary plat process, so that they can then take it off in bite-sized chunks and build it based upon, maybe it's their financing, maybe it's the economy, maybe it's the type of housing, if it's like a mixed type of housing development, or maybe it's where the easiest lots to build. It could be a lot of reasons why they do that. But the key being is that you've got a lot of lots waiting in the wings that have gone through a significant a part of the approval process. It's very difficult, unless they just let it all expire, for them not to be able to just keep things moving. And it's a very assured way. It provides for predictability. You've heard me say that a few times. For the developer, they know that if once they get through the preliminary plat process, it's just getting those final plats submitted. So it's really just a small segment of that bigger picture. And so, when you look at that, 670 lots, it's that we have that potential for those to come if the developer, property owner so chooses to get those online into that top column there, which is they're like ready to build. So.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. A follow-up question to that. Thank you so much, Director Tini. I guess, so is it oftentimes the process, and sorry for asking questions that people might know, that a developer is like, hey, we should preliminarily plat this out and work with the City and Planning Commission to do that so then they can take a chunk of it? Or is there a way that this can, I guess my overall question is it possible to go through this preliminary plat process before developers are in the game? Does that even exist? Or is that like a waste of time for the city to do? Is that a benefit? Could that be a benefit to say, we have all this land that's incorporated by the city, can we just go ahead and look at platting all of this? I know that's maybe a ridiculous question, but does that exist in the world, or does it really take a developer that's going to want to invest money and time to go through that first phase to even get it to where it could be final plat?
You might see a city, if they have city-owned land, do that on their own, plat their own property. Typically, you wouldn't see a community go forward and plat someone else's property. You would have to get their permission still. They still have their rights of their land ownership. It also probably wouldn't be very advantageous. There's not a way to think of you're thinking like of jump starting the process. Like, how do we get more preliminary plats done sooner or quicker? You really are going to have that property owner need to do that engineering and the analysis to decide what's going to work best, right? And that's usually done at that developer level, not usually done by the city. We may, like you're seeing maybe with the Slade Elementary School projects, like a little bit of that on a small scale. But when you're talking about large pieces of property, it's extensive engineering and design and things. And it's really not advantageous until they're ready to do it. Because once they get that step done, they're probably going to be working on a project maybe 10, 15, 20 years in this community. It's that long of final plats that, every couple years to build roads and, sell lots, build roads, put that money back into infrastructure to build the next phase to start to capitalize on what they've started out maybe 10, 15 years ago. So.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. Unless there are one more question, Councilor Shumway, or maybe more.
Well, this is
right ahead.
It is a question. I know sometime in the future, I don't know how many years it's going to be, they're going to open up 15th Street again, and there's going to be an influx of students going into new student housing dormitories. My question is this: what is the thought? What has been the thought? How much impact is that going to have on, let's say, rental properties that they will move out of and move into the dorms, and will that make that available for us to have more? They'll change them from rental properties to selling the property to people that are looking for housing. What is the impact? What impact is that going to have once they open up the new student dorms?
What I could speak to is this is what we've traditionally seen when we've seen other student housing come online, is when we see other student housing online, typically what we see is some of that lower end property that may be like student rental properties, sometimes do start to transition back into just they're not able to be rented because there's other units available for people to rent that are nicer or maybe, newer or whatever the factor is that person is looking for. And what we see is often some of that housing stock at the lower end go back into like first time ownership, and someone buys it and we see a remodel, or they do they fix it up, right? We saw that very heavily in 2012 when some of that student housing went in. I mean, that was private student housing, but it has the general same effect. And it was, we saw a lot of like what I would say, a small bungalow that, was great rental for probably a long time. It just wasn't as attractive anymore. And so then instead of trying to rent it, the person sold it. And so then the person that bought it, was maybe a little bit beat up, right? It was a rental for a while. And so they fixed it up, and now it's a, new single family home that kind of moves back into that kind of that housing stock, I guess is what I would call it. And so that's what we've seen. Whether we see that with the new dorms and all that, it's hard to predict that, really.
I just wanted to add to that, Council, I would remind you too, your second category of goals all around housing do outline sort of things that staff are working on and that you will be working on as well this year. It was recommended in the Economic Development Plan, to Councilmember Shumway's question, and then we have echoed it in your goals for this year, that we should, once those dorms come online, analyze the short and long-range impact of UW student housing on the housing stock. So our Economic Development Plan in 2020 saw that coming and said, wow, this could change things in Laramie, and that is restated in your goals this year, now that we're almost at the point where we can actually evaluate that with that North Dorm coming online in the fall, and I believe the South Dorm in the spring. So,
great. All right. Well, thank you for that. I am, I think, most excited about what the city is doing with our own property and those partnerships, like the Slade property, for example, and utilizing those properties as examples for what builders can do. I think it's great that we can set the direction of what we want, and we can maximize the number of houses or units in those areas and really get kind of creative with that property that we have. So I appreciate y'all thinking about that and moving forward so aggressively with those pieces. Any public comment on this item? Come on up.
I have a question.
Sure.
Diana Seebeck. My question is for you, Director Tini, I believe. Is soil quality not a factor anymore with modern building techniques? It used to be that our alkali soil was a big factor in preventing houses being built. Is that mitigated now with modern techniques?
Let's go ahead and answer that one. Let's get wild tonight.
Yeah, Mayor, through you, Ms. Seebeck. Soil quality can affect housing construction. What we do know in Laramie, there are areas within the community that don't have the most favorable soil quality. Actually, though, what we're finding is developers have figured out ways to build their houses in a way that can help mitigate that. Actually, just right there on South 9th Street, you're going to see some new units going in down there. I'm not probably the best to speak to this, but that developer has spent a lot of time kind of educating us a little bit and just kind of telling us about some of the techniques that they're using. And, they're using different housing construction techniques, specifically with the foundation, to avoid those soils or the effects of those soils on their housing. And so, it takes extra work, it takes extra engineering, but it's something that they are, they're figuring out ways around it. Doesn't mean that you can solve every issue. I don't think that's probably the case, but I think that in some of our areas, maybe where previously it wasn't the best, now they're finding ways to work around that. And so.
Great. All All right, any other public comments on this agenda item? All right, let's see, seeing none and none online. City Council updates and comments. Should we just start with Councilor O'Doherty? Okay, Councilor Newman. Councilor Vigil. Councilor Lockhart.
Thank you. I attended the Albany County Tourism Board monthly meeting yesterday, and it was mainly for some grants requests from some different organizations. One was from the Goat Lady that brings the goats, and she also has a facility that takes care of animals. Another one was from Jubilee Days, and Laramie Rangers baseball for a tournament. So it's really interesting to see when these organizations ask for help, the parameters that it has to fit to be able to get a grant from the tourism board. And so so they come prepared, showing how it'll affect tourism, like the baseball tournament. You know, it's going to bring a lot of people to town, and hotels and things of that nature, and ideas on how to track how many nights you're getting in a hotel, and some different ideas that they're sharing, that they're doing, or that the board has for them. So, and they make it sometimes a prerequisite of the grant to be able to help do that. So, but that's all I have since our last meeting.
Great. Councilor Shumway.
No updates.
Councilor Freed.
So many updates. Not really, just a couple. On 4-9, I went to the Parks, Trees, and Rec Board meeting. Learned a lot of really cool things about purchasing cemetery plots. And I guess, you know, we're going to meet outside at our next meeting, which would be cool to tour some of the parks around here. Then the one crazy thing that was happening was one user group broke glass in the pool, as I'm sure most of the city officials know, and it's 189,000 gallons of water that had to be drained just to ensure safety. So good job in the city for making sure that we didn't overflow our systems and drained all that correctly. And then I also attended the Traffic Safety Commission on 410. We got a nice presentation about the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials from Eric Japp. And then we talked about e-bikes, and that was it. Thank you.
Great. Go ahead, Councilor Lockhart.
I forgot to, thank you, Mayor, or Vice Mayor, I forgot to include my wonderful tour that you and I took with City Manager Jordan last week, and it was amazing. Yes. I had no idea where our wastewater facility was, and we got a great tour by every property director or what have you, everywhere we went. So one of them was the rec center and the filters that we approved, and how big these things are. They're like submarines, is what they are. So very worth the money. So I wanted to thank her for the tour and whatnot too.
Ditto. Councilor Bowling.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'll be quick. Since last we met, I attended the Rifle Range Board meeting. The only thing that folks should know is that this Saturday, starting at 9 o'clock, is a work session to do some improvements, some updates there. All the ranges will be closed, and I am in need of one volunteer because they bailed on me. So if anyone wants to go and do a little sweat equity with me on Saturday, just reach out. I also attended the Railroad Depot Association on behalf of Councilor Freed. Business as usual, some discussion about changing committee structures. I think the biggest thing to know is that they elected a new secretary who is now Ron Bagby. And then the gala is also this Saturday from 5 to 9 at the Depot. And then myself and Vice Mayor Richardson and Councilor O'Doherty attended the swearing-in ceremony for new officers at LPD.
Awesome, thank you.
That's it.
Thank you. And I attended a DDA meeting last night. We are making progress. I think an RFQ is going to go out to help with kind of a refresh of the downtown plan, which is great. attended, well, the data group with the Housing Coalition met, and we're working on a survey to go out to community members to find out what kind of housing community members actually want. And then Pilot Hill met again. They are working on, of course, the lot is launching in May. They hope to have it finished by September, and we'll be planning like a ribbon cutting big celebration in September, and I think that's about it, so I'll stop there. Yes, please.
I just want to let you all know, I'll be going to Casper for the WHAM board meeting on Thursday. Councilor Shumway will be there as well, and we will be presenting Laramie's proposal for hosting the WHAM 2026 conference, so we'll let you know how that goes. And I have your packet in my office, Councilor.
Great. Anything else? All right. 8:57, we are adjourned.